What if the one thing we avoid the most is the very thing that could change someone's life? We all talk about the weather, we all talk about politics, and me personally, endlessly about football, the scorers, who did what, how did things go, work stresses, all the latest Netflix shows. But faith, that's a conversation often dies in our throats. What if the silence around faith is one of the loudest problems in our society today? And I'll come back to that point just in a moment. How many times have you felt the nudge to speak about what you believe, but then been stopped in your tracks and then sort of swallowed those words? At work, a colleague is clearly struggling, but you don't want to sound too religious. You don't want to sound too preachy. It could be with friends. A conversation drifts towards hope, purpose, morality. But you laugh it off. You don't lean into the conversation and put your opinion across. It could be even in your own family, when faith could heal a moment of tension. But you hold back, afraid of being mocked or misunderstood. But the question is, why do we do this? Why is faith one of the subjects that feels too risky, too heavy, too personal, too personal even to bring out into the open? Most of us don't stay silent because we don't care. We stay silent because we're afraid. Afraid of being labelled, afraid of being judged, or afraid of making things awkward. And maybe even afraid that our own faith isn't really strong enough to stand the question that might come back to us. But what if the very weakness we're afraid of showing is the one that makes our voice the most powerful? So imagine this. So you're in the supermarket, someone's in front of you and they're paying for the food or whatever it may be, and they're sort of clearly upset and mutters to themselves, I don't know how I'm going to cope anymore. I mean, what's easier? Just smile politely and just walk off back to the car or pay for your groceries? Or gently say, I've been there. My faith gave me the strength when I needed it the most. I think you'll probably agree that one feels rather safe and the other one feels quite terrifying, But which would you use, and which one would change everything for that moment, everything for that person? So, here's the irony. We live in a world where everybody talks, everybody communicates, but the most important things are whispered, even if they're spoken at all. Social media is all full of, shouting and opinions, about everything, but things aren't mentioned are hope, not about grace, and not about Jesus. So isn't it really strange that in an age of oversharing, faith is still treated like a family secret? Remember my comment earlier, about the silence around faith? What if the silence around faith is one, of the loudest problems today? Because silence communicates something. It says, this isn't worth talking about. The silence says it doesn't really matter enough. It says, faith is private. Let's just keep that locked away. But if we really believe faith brings peace, hope, forgiveness, and overall purpose, isn't silence actually a kind of betrayal? Jesus didn't keep quiet. He spoke in crowded markets. He spoke on hillsides. He spoke at dinner tables. He spoke, in the temples. And we all know this, that sometimes he was listened to, sometimes he was laughed at, sometimes, unfortunately, he was hated for it. But he never silenced himself. He never silenced himself to stay safe. So why do we? Talking about faith out loud in 2025 feels, and I don't know if this is a word, but countercultural. You can talk about yoga or mindfulness and well-being and universe and energies, and people look at you and nod along like, we know what you're going on about, John. But say, I am a Christian, and suddenly the room goes quiet. But why is that? Why do we treat faith like a taboo? It is a taboo, and the world is just drowning in noise. I mean, could it be the world is allergic to faith itself, but to the way we sometimes present it? Is it how we come across? I mean, if all people, if you know, if people just hear judgment, arguments, or rules, and of course they'll shut down. But what if they heard honesty, a bit of compassion, and dare I use that word, but humility instead of pride? Talking about faith out loud isn't about winning debates. It's not about having all the answers. It's not about referring to all the scriptures and having everything ready. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about saying, it's about saying this is what holds me together. This is about me offering the hope that once saved me. And yes, okay, it's awkward, uncomfortable, and even risky. But silence just doesn't heal anything. So let me ask you this question. Where do we need to break the silence this week? Quite a basic question, but what do we need to do to break that silence? So have we got a friend that's struggling? A colleague who feels maybe a bit lost? A family member that you've not picked the phone up to or avoided for a week, a month, a year? So what would happen today if we risked it? What would happen if you trusted God to use your words? And remember, it's not to be perfect, because the words we're going to use are honest. Faith spoken out loud must and might just be the lifeline that someone else is waiting for. Keep learning, keep praying. There is room on the pew. And remember, you are loved.